Hi, I'm KUDO Mal, Branch Chief of KUDO Wales in the UK. I'm on a mission to raise awareness for KUDO and the benefits of being a martial artist. KUDO is a full contact mixed martial art and combat sport developed by Grandmaster Azuma Takashi. In my opinion, KUDO is the perfect way for martial arts to pressure test the efficiency and their technique as well as their fighting ability, as it's the closest thing you're going to get to a real fight.
Hello everybody, I'm Iain Abernethy.
Iain is one of the leading exponents of applied karate and has written a number of critically acclaimed books on practical application of the traditional martial arts, as well as his known work on pragmatic use of techniques and concepts recorded in traditional kata. Iain's seminars, books, DVDs and articles have proved to be very popular with those groups and individuals which to practice their arts in a pragmatic way. Iain is also listed in the Combat Hall of Fame. Let's meet Iain. Iain, welcome to Fighting Talk.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. How's things with you? Everything okay?
Yeah, all right. Just missing the dojo like everyone else, but other than that, things are good.
That's. I'm lucky, to be honest. Mine's only up the road, and I'm the only person allowed in there, so I can still train a bit. So I just hit things a bit harder. So I've done. I hope you enjoyed the intro, and hopefully I covered everything. But for anybody that's like you've said in your other videos that is not aware of Iain for some reason, crazy stuff. I mean, you come up on every feed I ever see, so you need to get a life and go and have a look for the stuff. But I just thought we'd start the interview with a few kind of quick questions. Like you said, that you don't answer the questions very quickly, so let's try you out.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed, and you can not answer this one if you want, but which would annoys you more, that when people spell Iain wrong or Abernethy wrong?
Abernethy, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what would you say your favorite kata is at the moment?
Nahanchi Shodan.
Well, awesome. And have you got a favorite past master?
The one I find most Itosu is the one I find most interesting because he's the guy who kick-started the modern era effectively. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what would you say is the most efficient strike with the highest percentage of success?
For me, it'd be a left hook, but again, left hook. Different. Yeah.
Is it an occasional left hook or just an avid left hook?
Oh well, double hit the left hook is my strongest favourite strike. So
okay, I'll watch out for that.
Yeah, your mileage may vary,
All right, so we're taking on an era thing now. Was Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers?
Ninja Turtles for me. Yeah.
Oh, Miyagi-Do or Cobra Kai?
What was the last one, sorry?
Miyagi-Do or Cobra Kai?
Well, Cobra Kai is more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I gone with the dark side this today. So I know you'd be the light side. Have you got, and obviously knowing that you're a father as well, have you got a favourite children's TV program?
No, not really. You know what I mean? I enjoy watching all the shows with my kids because they enjoy them, but I don't think there's one that leaps to mind as a favourite.
At least they're in English. My wife's Spanish, and I have to listen to all the kids' stuff. And there's one called Juegos, and I got no clue. So that makes two of us. So all right then. So when some of your recent stuff, would you say Anko Itosu's 10 or Funakoshi's 20 precepts?
The ones I personally, I think Funakoshi's 20 are a work of genius.
Yeah,
for covering so much of karate in 20 sentences. Itosu's is historically very interesting and important, but to get a handle on some of the aspects of karate, Funakoshi's 20.
Definitely. Yeah. Some really, really good stuff. I wanted to, you got the martial map and things like that, and I know that people have been questioning you on that. It's really, to be honest, I think some of the work that you've done, it takes a while to actually kind of understand it. I think, you seem to be a fair bit down the road than most people who they're trying to interpret it. So I'm not going to ask you a question on those. So I'll steer clear. I'll think about it a bit longer before we do it. But it's fair to say that you're one of the pioneers, if not the most prevalent pioneer for the practical karate movement. I've met some fantastic people during lockdown, like Les and Brian and so on. It's been really nice to see that actually people have been pulling together. But when people sort of quote you, say for instance, someone says, "Does anybody know any bunkai or oyo for this kata?" And then straight away it'll be, check the in stuff out, So, there's a fair bit of pressure on you there really to be providing that kind of historical information and that missing code, if you like. But at the same time, you can see that, you know, I made a comment on one of your videos. It was very kind of like a cross training sort of mixed martial arts sort of drill, which I really liked it, you know. And you've got this one side where you've got the need for karate to evolve and stay current, and you've got the other side, which is this historical need that you've got, I suppose, that you're the go-to person. How do you keep a sort of middle ground with, because you must be mulling this stuff over all of the time?
Yeah, and the big problem is, though, I think, is what people define as traditional isn't. Right. You know, so people have taken a snapshot of 1930s, 1940s karate and gone, that's it. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's traditional karate. So they ignore what's the past, and then they ignore any potential for progress. But if you look at like the real tradition, it's been one of constant evolution. So those who want to kind of keep it the same aren't traditionalists. You know, they're not following the tradition. So there's not a single generation of the past masters who passed on the art exactly as it was taught to them. You know, Funakoshi talks about, you know, the world changes, time changes, and the martial arts must change too. He tells us that when he was training, Itosu and Izato, his two main teachers, would take him to experts in various systems to learn their specialities, to make it part of his karate. You know, it's just throughout the entire history, you can see that this constant evolution. And as a friend of mine once remarked, no other field of human endeavor thinks it reached perfection in the 1940s. You know, we just acknowledge that, you know, you might be, you know, super old classic cars or whatever, but a modern one's a better car, you know. So I think it's the same thing with karate. It needs to continue to evolve. But if the old masters turned up today and we were doing exactly what they were doing, I think they'd be massively disappointed. I always think it's like science. Like if Einstein, Newton turned up today and people said, oh, no, we just stayed exactly, we just did what you did and we didn't bother researching any further, it'd be livid. You know, the whole point is to progress this thing. And I think if you love something, you've got to see it thrive. I always think a tree's a good analogy for this, because, you know, people talk about karate's roots, and I always remind them that the points of the roots, or one of the main points of the roots, is to ensure new growth. You know, the tree that stays exactly the same is a dead tree, and it'll start to rot. The tree that's constantly grown, its roots are fulfilling the purpose there. And I think that's what we need to do in karate as well. So I get that, like these training methods we adopt, or other things I've learned from other arts or techniques, and I make them part of my karate in the same way the old masters do. Karate itself is an eclectic system. It's a mix of all kinds of things, you know, so I don't see any reason for that process to stop. You're not abandoning your roots by doing that. You're abandoning the roots if you go, no, it stays the same, it never alters.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know there's certain articles? I mean, I've got dyslexia, so and I've never been diagnosed. My daughter's got it, and I've learned so much from her. You know, I don't need the test; I know it. You know, and I come across your material first on a podcast. My friend one of my students gave me a book of yours, one of the original books, and it only really resonated when I actually listened to some of your podcasts, your early podcasts, and you know, that medium is fantastic. But I kind of like the romanticized stories, and I also like those that are kind of that actually say, I've got a book here somewhere that was explaining about like Sokomatsu move that go into beat the bull up, you know, every night with a stick. So when he got into there, everybody thought it was his complete, you know, his power of chi and the rest of it.
The bull scared of him.
It's all scared, right? And, you know, Anko punching through a door and holding onto a guy on the other side, you know, and these sort of things, you know, there's got to be a place, you know, for that kind of love for that. To inspire. There's, you know, they can't be going around destroying every story, can you? It's
no,
you know,
I think even the ones that we know aren't true, they're still interesting because somebody found it important enough to tell that story. So why was that story told? That in itself becomes interesting. So, you know, things like you know, karate evolved from the Shaolin monks when a Zen monk came there and found, you know, that's completely untrue. You know what I mean? But why was that story told? You know, and then you get into, you know, the cultural influences and the need for the cultural need for lineages and all this kind of stuff. You know, all the stories are interesting. They don't need to be true to remain interesting. It's like good fiction too, right? You know, you watch a movie like Shawshank Redemption, it's not true, but it tells you a lot about perseverance and friendship, and you know what I mean? So it's the same thing, you know, you don't need, they don't need to be true. I don't think you need to abandon all of that stuff, but you just, you know, make the differential between what's figuratively true and literally true.
But like now more than ever, I've realized that you know, you've got to you've got to use anything to motivate yourself to train, you know, and especially through times like this. And I was speaking to Anthony Pendlebury, who's just joined the BCKA as well. Fantastic guy. And recently I travelled to North Wales, and we were allowed to do that before everybody jumps on me. We're allowed to travel around in Wales, but to see Paul Wong, who's the Shaolin monk. And I did that because it was for my birthday, and my wife said, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" I said, "I'll just do something completely different, you know. I just want to, but I want to do something martial arts related. Let's go to the north, you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful place." And I asked Paul, you know, I was asking him some quite difficult questions about the origins, and it's always a bit of a touchy subject, isn't it, when you talk about origins? But when he talked to me about his forms, he was just, you know, because his father was Shaolin, that it was his connection with the history, and you know, it was a duty to pass it on, and you know, he really connected to that, and I found that so infectious, you know, that I thought, well, actually, that's gone from there. But with karate, it seems a bit, you know, when I'm in Japan, for instance, and you can see, unless somebody makes that decision there, it doesn't seem to spread to the rest of the world. And it feels like stuff that you're doing, for instance, is completely obvious that it fits a lot better. But do you think it has to come from Japan before the greater community will finally say, okay, that makes more sense? Or
I don't know. I mean, I recently did a video for my app users about that, you know, why people are sometimes resistant to change.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that I've had, you know, who's Ian to say, because he's not Japanese, you see. Yeah. And I think, well, there's a word for that when we say that a certain group of people are superior to others. You know what I mean? It's not a good thing, you know.
Yeah, you mean racism?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So you should judge any innovation on its merit. And the thing is, again, if you look at the history of it, I mean, I always joke to my students saying we're doing a Western version of a Japanese version of an Okinawan version of a Chinese art. You know what I mean? So, you know, karate belongs to everybody, and it's worked both ways too. I mean, if you look at, like, you go to Japan, you know, they'll use punch bags and focus mitts, which were Western innovations. You see in modern sparring, the footwork is influenced by Western boxing. Jesse Enkamp did a good video recently where he thinks that, you know, some of the kicking originated in French savate. You know, the art is just, it's a global art. So, you know, and I guess for some people, you know, a big part of their attraction is, you know, Japanese culture is fascinating and the Japanese aesthetic, and they really want to connect with that. So in that case, I can understand, you know, the desire to kind of maintain all that stuff. But I think when it comes to function, if it works, it works. It doesn't matter who came up with it or what part of the world it was or what language they speak. If a training method's good, we should adopt it, you know. Yeah,
definitely. Like that whole Japan thing I was a bit worried about going there, if I'm honest, because, you know, you don't want to destroy the dream. It's a bit like meeting you, actually. When I met you, I was like, oh my God, I've kind of been reading this stuff, and and obviously everybody steals a bit, don't they? So some of the Nahanchi stuff was for me was brilliant. Anyway, so I digress. I kind of I got to a point where I found that the karate community was just so fickle between them, and I'm not asking you to choose styles and stuff, but I was just kind of fed up of people saying, "Oh, that's judo," or "That's this," or "That's that," because I wanted to practice something that I'd learned, you know. And then eventually, it was not actually any of that got me out of a style, if you like. It was more to do with giving my students the opportunity to test what they've learned. So if I say, "Oh, this works," and then they say, "Oh, sensei, you know, it's not enough for me," and you see growth when people learn. So I kind of split it into the warrior and the scholar. When I realized that, like, the warrior bit was being fulfilled by KUDO, I realized that I didn't have necessarily the scholar aim, where it was still this growth and researching and looking for better ways to do things, and that comes from Kata and practice of karate. And then obviously I got my feet in very, very different grounds, you know. And, you know, I just thought, like, is there with Kion, for instance, like one step, I literally just binned that off first thing I did, because, you know, it was like that. I just can't imagine anybody attacking like this anyway. And then the sparring was kind of a little bit like it, you know. So I was like, right, we can't really do that either, you know. We've got to change it up totally. And then it left us with a syllabus which was kind of trying to strip what was left, you know. And, you know, do you think that people that still practice Kion, for instance, in line basics, still have got a chance to be able to transfer that into any sort of kumite? Because obviously we're only talking sparring, not self-protection or anything, just sparring.
Yeah, I think we can do, but it's got to be, there's got to be a progression there. So, I mean, I sometimes use the term 3K karate, you know, so kata, kumite, and kion, but the crucial bit is I go, kata, kumite, and kion, and never the three shall meet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're all practiced as separate disciplines. So people do kion to get good at kion, kata to get good at kata, and the kumite bears no resemblance to the two. Typically points WKF sparring, you know, is what traditionalists will do. So to me is I still have my students going up and down the rowing lines, but they can see the direct progression from what we're doing there. So it's a chance to work on their own internal awareness of their body motions without any external distractions. Not how hard is the pad being hit. I want them thinking, where's your little toe at? Where's your head at? Where's the arm at? You know, so it's for a purpose. And then we'll take the technique into sparring and on the pads and various drills, and they can test it. They can then identify where or I can identify for them where the technique's failing. So every time you throw that punch, you're dropping your arm. Look, let's go back to the kion. Let's practice that and make sure that arm is up. You know, your hip part isn't right. Let's go back to kion and let's see why we can do this. So I think when you've got it all gelled together, it all fits together quite nicely. It's when it's disconnected, I think. And I'm with you on the you know, the kind of formal oizuki stuff. And I mean, and again, that's where, like we said about the history. If you look at when that appeared, that's a bad attempt to ape what judo and kendo do. So if you look at the Nagano kata of judo, for example, you know, and it works for them. They'll unbalance you once, unbalance you twice, throw you on the third time. So it makes perfect sense. So the karate guys went, well, if that, and kendo, they often do drills of 5 for distancing. You know, I'll tap your head and you'll move forwards 5 times in there. So they just copy those practices. But it doesn't work for karate at all. You know, it's an historical anomaly. And when you ask people why, I mean, people could do it because they go, I just like the art of it. I find them interesting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when people claim a practical function for them, there isn't one. And the other thing with kion as well is some of it is, so some people argue, I know this isn't a practical sequence, you know, like nukate, knife hand, front kick, side kick without putting your leg down, whatever. You know, but they'll go, but it teaches you to move. And I think, but it teaches you to move in a way that you'll never actually move in combat. So what's the point? You know, do break dancing or ballet instead. That'll teach you how to move, you know. So what we have done is you've got single motions, you know, standard kion. We've got sequences right out of kata. And then we've got combinations which are directly applicable, you know what I mean? And I think that's what everyone should do. And then it all fits together for me.
So I think like the sort of step in oizuki, you know, like that's so, you know, I mean, you're talking a lot of years of practicing that. And then Tennocate, I think it was called Tennocate, you know, standing on the spot. We had to sort of, when the dojos were very small, that we couldn't practice kata. So my dojo right now is only 4 meters wide, you know, so the sparring practice, everything in partners works really well. But as soon as you start putting people in lines, like, it's not enough room. But you know, that's so well ingrained in me that I can usually hit my jab from a big distance because of those long. And I'll tell you that when I think it was one of the earlier stuff that you did was where you were throwing the punch and allowing the stance to catch the body. You know, and those sorts of things, you know, the light bulb moments, they go, well, yeah, that makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Actually get the punch in there first, use your body weight, get everything behind it, and then use the stance. And sort of the mawate, you know, after every third punch too, that kind of hit and then moving off to the side is still very much embedded in what I teach in the KUDO, you know. So I think, you know, it's definitely got that. But there's with, you know, the most recent questions I've been doing are about mixed martial arts. And, you know, it seems to be again, the 2 camps. And my last video was with Mark Spencer up in Bradford. And, you know, meeting, I think it's almost like people are a bit worried to reach out to speak to these people because it's like the new generation. And, you know, we're a little bit worried about these people. They might hurt us or something, you know. And I confess to say that early doors, I wouldn't get into MMA because it didn't have that etiquette and the regime. It was just like usually a few bouncers having a scrap, or you know, or a few guys that fancied that. But it's moved on so much now, hasn't it? And you know, do you think that karate, for instance, is got a place within coaching mixed martial arts? Like,
I mean, obviously, like I mean, there are well-known karate fighters that have done fairly well in MMA, but it's not my field of expertise. So, you know, that's probably a question best directed to MMA style coaches. But in terms of, you know, I mean, fundamentally, you know, if you're teaching karate holistically, you've got striking, kicking, choking, strangling, throwing, you know what I mean? So there's a lot, there's a base there that people could use. I often think as well, where we are at the moment as well, in the kind of pragmatic karate community, if you can call it that, I think I also have this idea in my mind that the type of karate we're doing changes as we age. You know, and one of karate's great strengths is every age point, it's got something for you. Yeah. So, you know, kids can do it as exercise and discipline, and, you know, it keeps them fit and healthy and encourages a healthy lifestyle. You know, 30-somethings, 40-somethings, I probably want to do more of the self-defense based stuff, or just the interest in learning the skill. You know, I'm crossing the barrier into my 50s, so staying fit and healthy for as long as I possibly can becomes more important to me. Yeah. You know, I've got a relative who's in his 80s who still does kata every day. You know what I mean? So, you know, he doesn't spar and he doesn't hit pads. So, but the one bit we're missing at the moment is those 20-somethings at that age. It's important to prove yourself to yourself and your peers. Yeah, and I don't think we have that. The competitive format that karate generally use doesn't fit in with that wider pragmatic framework, which is why I think the kudos that's the one to fill that gap. I think. Yeah, right. Okay. You know, because it is the closest to the way traditional karate would be due to its holistic nature, because it has gripping and throwing and elbowing and kneeing and all that kind of stuff. I think that the only, you know, if you've got a professional job, for example, they might not want to, you know, the fact it's heavy contact, you know, so whether they ever come up with a light of contact version, like an amateur version, you know what I mean? So people could compete and then go to school the next day or go to work, you know, might be something. But yeah, we need that, you see.
Well, I mean, that was what was bringing on to my next question, really, was that obviously I was going to ask you what you thought of KUDO, obviously with Peter, you've been so close to Peter and developing the BCKA and WTA and all the rest of those organizations. You know, again, this is going back to that kind of warrior and scholar, was that I found that sometimes with the karate kind of research and getting so much into that I was starting to slide away from reality, and that always gave me that kind of insecurity of whether could I actually still do it. And no one wants to feel like a relic of a thing of the past, right? So there's one thing if your students handing your rear end to you in class with the stuff you've taught them, and there's another thing of actually I probably could have done better on that if I was a little bit more sharper. And like with the KUDO, for instance, what I'm finding is really like crazy. Obviously, the MMA guys are just looking at us like you're just karate with a few throws and takedowns, or they're like, that's not, you know, why are you wearing that head guard and you know, all of that sort of stuff. That's not man enough. And I think like that is that kind of age group, isn't it? Of guys. And the other thing was within the traditional format, when I go into as a KUDO practitioner, so if I go to a karate seminar and someone doesn't know me, I tend to wear my karate stuff. Yeah, you know, with just a very plain kanji or something on there. Because as soon as someone knows you're from the KUDO thing, they think that you're just gonna like jump on their back and strangle them or something. You know, so I feel like we're kind of stuck. KUDO is kind of stuck in the middle of you know. But I also think that's the perfect place to be, isn't it? Between evolution and obviously traditions, because it still has that tradition. But you know, the gi is very important. I've not seen anything about that on. But is the gi important to you as a training item, or is it something that you?
It can be useful because it can be a good analog for everyday clothing, you know what I mean? So I live in a place that's cold and wet for 99.9% of the days, right? So the northern stereotype of wearing t-shirts in freezing weather generally holds true. But, you know, the fact is you need to be able to deal with grips and you need to be able to use clothing. So I think in that way it can be a useful analog. But I do a mix, you know, there's... I normally teach in one. Now that we're online teaching, I don't put a gi on unless someone specifically requests for students to train in normal clothes. A lot of my training is just done in normal clothing as well. But there are definitely times where, you know, the gi it's useful and important. Because you get that argument, see, people go, well, you can't rely on the gi. You know, you can't rely on the gi. You know, you need to get used to holding the body. And I think, yeah, well, you do, but you also need to get used to defending against clothing grips, because that can happen too. Got a story on that as well. Right? So years ago, and I was training with some full-time judo athletes, right? And one of my students was also training with them. So we'd train on the Monday night, and then there'd be a small group session on the Tuesday morning. So the dojo's 60 miles away from my home. So I would drive home, sleep in my own bed and drive back. The younger guys would just sleep on the dojo floor ready for the next day. And they kept asking me, just stop over there. I'm not sleeping on the dojo floor with a group of 20-somethings. So anyway, one of these occasions, they got involved in a discussion. So this guy's, one of them's a student of mine, one of them's an international level judo player. And they were talking about the gi, And my student made the comment. He goes, "Yeah, the thing with judo is you never train without the gi, though. You know what I mean? So you get, you're not quite sure. You don't really practice doing the throws without the gi."
Yeah.
And this judo international went, he goes, "I think I could do all the throws immediately without the gi." And he says, "Do you want to try it out?" Not being funny, really nice guy. And yeah, let's try it. So I said to my student, "How did that work?" Then he goes, "He bounced me off all 4 walls." So this is a guy who's never trained with the gi on.
Yeah.
Never trained without the gi, but took it off, and it took him seconds to work it out. So I think this, the argument that it doesn't hold true, really. You see it in MMA, people using judo throws all the time now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but the KUDO gi is the sleeves are short, and I think that's quite a frustration for judoka, because they want to grip hold of that. And Judo Steve, one of our instructors, you can just see he's looking at all this stuff. I can't put some of the stuff that we do, because obviously there's a lot of probably things would be seen as inappropriate. But he's I showed him a kata, and he's going, "That's this," like a stepping through, like what we consider like a knife hand strike and things like that. And it's just like all the time. And you said in one of your interviews that you went back to judo for a while. And was that like a big spark for you to push the throws in karate? Because people would just assume, like, I found something, a conversation, and obviously you're much better with me with dates and historical information, but there was a conversation, wasn't there, between Jigoro Kano and Kishin Funakoshi about the throws, and at that exact time, the Kodokan changed their throwing syllabus and added the Tewaza set to it, which, considering they're all very much thing, me and Steve argue about this all the time. But there has to have been an influence between judo and karate on judo, around about that time.
Yeah, historically, I wouldn't know. I mean, this in terms of the technical influence, but in terms of cultural, it's massive. The fact that we wear the gi, we use the belt system, it became karate do. Judo is a really popular art, so karate did its best to ape some of its qualities. And then I think what it started to do as well is it wanted to. I mean, Funakoshi was offered a job by Kano. And Kano wrote a letter saying he approved of this karate, it would make a useful part of judo. So it's almost like, the karate guys then went, okay, we want to be like judo, but we don't want to be subsumed by judo. And I think that's part of the reason that the throwing element starts to diminish, because they want to be different. But in my case, it was Jeff Thompson. I was training with Jeff once a month. I was training with Peter Constein every week. Jeff said to me, "Are you striking?" He's looking really good, with Peter's influence and stuff. He says, "You want to, next thing is get your grappling up to that level, you see." So I was lucky that one of my black belts, a student of mine, was the assistant instructor of an incredibly good judo club, the one I've just been talking about. Yeah. So that they were. So I went along and said, I'm looking to train in judo, and they went, "Yeah, that's fine. Come on the Tuesday mornings as well. We have these, elite level things, and come along." I thought, well, that was really nice. I later realised one of the internationals was a heavyweight. He didn't have a short, dumpy heavyweight to practice on. I was effectively there as a cheaper version of a grappling dummy, but I learned loads. Not all of it fits well with the karate, because you've got like the modern sport of judo. So, for example, skills to turn a guy who's face down onto his back, irrelevant to judo, but nothing else. You know what I mean? I enjoyed learning them for the game of judo. But when I bring them back to karate, those things get dropped. But I remember my judo instructor said, "Okay, have you done some throwing in the karate?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Can I see it?" I showed him the throw, and he goes, "Yeah, it looks like 1950s judo." You know what I mean? Because karate, judo's continued to evolve. So it was good to learn a lot of the modern stuff, and you just realise how incredible their throwing skills are.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's what they're focusing on, but that was really useful. So I got some training methods, some technical tips. I bring them back into the karate, and that's helped improve our throwing elements as well. You see.
So, like you said about you being a shorter, stockier guy. Is that why you kind of connect with Anko Itasu and the stuff? Because that's how he was described. Is that right?
Yeah, baby face, which I'm maybe not.
Yeah,
yeah, but a short little dumpy guy with the silhouette of a barrel is fun of costumes. That would fit. Yeah.
Like the throws as well. Do you think the throws because obviously I'm getting not critique because Steve's a great guy. Because I started in judo and went to karate, back to judo. It's the usual sort of stuff. And I just realised that it's much easier to throw someone if you've hit them first. And the karate throws, for instance, they're quite raw, aren't they? From what I can understand from the mechanics of them, and they do seem to take a strike to get them to kind of work. They're not as refined, are they, as the judo throws?
No, because that's the thing, because that's their speciality, right? So obviously they spend a great deal of time working on it. But the other thing is, we would use them tactically differently. Yeah. So for a judo guy, it's his primary thing. That's what they do. For us, the most definitely a secondary skill set. It's like one of my friends. I've told the story loads of seminars, but I'll keep it brief. But I was once practicing on a grappling dummy before we changed the movement for a two-handed shoulder throw, and one of my training partners, who's a striker through and through, looked at it and went, "What are you doing?" I went, "I'm doing a two-handed shoulder throw." And he goes, "Show me this." Well, everyone stops because, this guy's about to attempt to throw. So he takes the grip on the dummy, lets go, and bang, hits it with a hook, and this thing goes swinging around. And he looks at me with a look of disgust and went, "Two-handed shoulder throw, one-fisted throw," he said, And we all laughed. Yeah, but I thought he's right. Like, you want to put a guy flat on his back, the easiest way to do it is punch him in the head, right? So that's our primary skill. And then we use the throwing to back up that skill. Yeah. So we wouldn't spend as much time on it, otherwise it would distract from the primary method. So that's one reason they're not as refined. And the other one is that they generally don't need to be because of the fact that the striking remains the primary method in the setup. But like I say, I train in judo. A lot of the two of the other instructors, three of the other instructors who train at my dojo, they've all trained in judo. Two of my black belts are judo instructors. That it's a great fit for karate because it has a similar ethos as well. The karate throws are definitely cruder, but so if people want to get really good at throwing and learn high quality throwing, judo is the way to go, I think.
I just find that with the judo, it's the key element of that is like the kazushi, isn't it? It's the spatial balance. And that was one thing that, from the karate perspective, besides yourself, that was looking at that in a very different way. When they've been told this is what this movement for, this is what this one's for. It was always very static, so it was always trying to drag someone from being rooted to be able to do things. And I was found that judo can overcome that. But with thanks for sharing some of the videos that I've been doing recently. It's really helpful because obviously I'm trying to build my channel. I'm being very obvious with my agenda. Obviously I'm trying to push KUDO. I'm trying to get the channel more numbers. But the Kensetsu was a video that I did where I had some very bizarre feedback from that. Some really good stuff that and automatically it's like the one I did with the throwing was like, oh yeah, you're in KUDO, so you must do in judo, right? So it's like no, it's like some of the throws are judo throws. It's the difference between like, oh gosh, in a cross buttocks throw, completely different, right? And setup and all that. But then when I was doing the Kensetsu, the people were just very much like, oh, no, that's Aikido, and I'm like, oh, come on, man. We're doing without actually demonstrating, because I'm like, as in demonstrate part of the kata, put my gi on, and then here's the kata, here's the movement. What do you think of like general locks and stuff? Do you think?
That drives me mad. So
thanks.
I think what's happened is, so if you look at the history of most martial arts, they start off as fairly broad systems because combat demands that, right? You need to be able to kick, punch, lock, strangle, throw. Combat just demands that you need a wide range of skills. Yeah. And then what happens is with most martial arts, they stop thinking of an external opponent and they focus on an internal one. So Thai boxers fight Thai boxers, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, continental fighting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, Wing Chun guys want to out-trap other Wing Chun guys. And then what happens is these arts then become very specialized, you know, and then people tend to associate that speciality with that art.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like no one ever in human history thought of a throw before Kano came up with them. You know what I mean? Is, you know, those throws will be present in every single combative system all over the world to lesser and greater degrees. I always point to the bow and arrow as an example of this. Every single culture, ancient culture, came up with the bow and arrow, and it wasn't like the Steve Jobs of his day invented it and went on a world tour to sell it to everybody. So, you know, they all work out. You can hit with your fists, your elbows. They all work out. You can throw and choke and strangle. So all the arts develop these things independently. But then as a modern martial artist, they look at it, and as soon as you say they go a wrist lock, they go, it's Aikido.
Yeah.
You know, a throw, it's Judo. Well, no, it's a wrist lock, and every system has them. But I always think this, I think part of the problem that, like with the Judo thing is, because karate has a very similar uniform to it. When I did my Karate's Throne series, I mean, all of those videos I show where you can find them in the old books and where they're in the Kata. I've got pictures of the old masters doing it. But whenever I show them, people go, yeah, well, that's Judo. And I said, if I put on a wrestling singlet, not that anyone wants to see that, right? So, but if I was to do that, well, then people go, oh, this is wrestling. You know, it's just, I think, because I've dressed in what is effectively a lightweight Judo suit, given a throw, therefore it has to be Judo. And of course, you know, most, not all, because some of the throws in karate don't exist in Judo, you know, different. But a lot, there is a lot of crossover between the two. But that's just because it works on these two human bodies the same way. So same with joint locking. Every system you can think of will have some degree of joint locking in. You can look in old boxing manuals. You know, before the modern rules came in, and there's examples of throws and all this kind of stuff. Every system's got it.
Well, you know, it's like, the stuff that's going on at the minute. Obviously, I'm meeting a lot more BJJ guys, and they're giving me their angle on stuff. And you know, it's like you get a video that comes up, right, and it's got, let's say it's Aikido, and they're showing Ikkyo, and it's done all very well with all of the, you know, the setup, the etiquette and all that. And then BJJ video come on, exactly the same principle, wrist lock, but it's all good. You know, and then, you know, I noticed as well, it's like a couple of, and I mentioned Hanshi Mark House as well. I traveled all the way to Scotland to train with Hanshi Mark because he's a catch wrestler, and you know, I'm a big fan of catch wrestling, and they're like rocking those shit, unfortunately, to get it. You know, when he's doing a toe, you know, he's crunching your toes over. It's not just a leg lock; it's nastier, you know. And I just think that it's more palatable, and the BJJ guys are doing kata now as well, aren't they? They're rolling around, and then that's all good. Like, so it is very much what is flavor of the month, isn't it?
There is, I think there's yeah, definitely, right. So sometimes people go, because I do that art, you know, I have the same abilities as the elite practitioners of those arts, which isn't true. But the other thing is on that one, so, you know, the pandemic hits, and I remember watching a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu video where they were talking about these revolutionary new solo training drills, how useful they were, and they were going to keep these drills going forwards. And obviously, you know, quite a few of my circle of traditionalists get quite smug, saying, yeah, well, this is cat rocky onto us. We've been doing it for a long time. But I thought, yeah, hold on a second, though. Because the BJJ guys are using those solo drills with a clear progression to move on to drilling it with a partner, to move on to drilling it against resistance and everything else, you see. So sometimes the same methods can exist in the same art, but I think there's a big difference in how you train those methods. So I think one of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's strengths is that it puts a lot of emphasis on live practice. You know, and I think so if you take Aikido, generally doesn't. You know what I mean? So the same lock may exist, but one will train them in a more realistic way than the others. That's not to say all Aikido practitioners don't do live practice, because I know there's quite a few who do. You know what I mean? But I'm not aware of any Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners who don't practice live. I think it's getting that they can back it. It's like, again, you know, the BJJ guys, if you turn around and went, "Oh, that's kind of bullshit," they'd be like, "That, come on, I'll show you." And you'd be like, "Oh, all right then." And it's the same in Kudo. It's like they spend less time talking about it and more time going, "Oh, actually, I'll just show you. It's easier." And then, you know, that kind of divides that. But that, like you said about the age, because I find that
you know, there's a point, isn't there? No matter how good teacher you are, how many years experience, you get to a point where someone just doesn't understand what you're saying, and you have to show them in some shape or form, you know. And that's the bit that disheartens me a little bit, because obviously with injuries and things like that, you know, you can't afford to have your knee twisted or your shoulder wrenched back just to show or demonstrate, you know. And I'm lucky enough now that I've got the guys in my club that can do the things I can't do or demonstrate and that. But just one last question, what you reckon? Like, obviously, I'm trying to encourage. It's not for everyone, like you said, it's an age thing, and you know, I'm trying to push for KUDO to have like a veterans category, you know, so because I still fancy having a pop at it at some point. But do you think that am I flogging a dead horse trying to get people from a karate background to give it to test it in that environment? You know, is the Wilco and the Kyokushin rules the only way, do you think, forwards?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's two problems that I think it's got at the moment. Is it's not widely known enough about enough. You know, so that's. I mean, certain parts of the world. The first time I ever saw it, I was in there. I was on my way to Lee Taylor's. So I was doing a seminar the next day. I was staying in a hotel. I'm flicking through the channels, and I think it was Russia Today. You know, you know, and there's this big thing about the, you know, KUDO in Russia. You see, so this is great. You know what I mean? So I'm really impressed with it. So I know in certain parts of the world it's very big. Japan and Russia seems to be into it in quite a way. So I think its popularity needs to grow. And then as part of that, there's the more pragmatic traditionalists. I think they probably need to look at this and realise that if they're looking for a competitive outlet, especially for that 20-something demographic, you know what I mean? That is that's the best thing out there that we've got at the moment, I think. So I think as the exposure grows and that practical base starts to grow, I think people will look more and more on that and go, that's that missing link. You know, we've got karate for the middle age, you know, the elderly, the kids. You know, it's that 20-something who want to prove something to themselves and the peers. Because I mean, you know, I mean, in terms of a spectator sport as well. I mean, the one, you know, not to knock it in any way, shape or form, like, but if you take like, you know, WKF sparring's undoubtedly the most popular format. But I remember a friend of mine who's a former professional athlete. He's a former professional rugby player, right? Super fit guy. And I remember watching a karate bout with him, you know, and points bout, and just want his opinions on it. And he was blown away by the speed and the explosiveness of it, you know. And then he said, "But I can't understand who's winning. You know, it's too confusing. They move so quickly, and I can't work it out." So I think, therefore, it's got limited appeal. I think the KUDO is a lot simpler to work out who's winning.
You're knocked out, so he's submitted.
Very simple. You know what I mean? So I think in terms of capturing the public's imagination, I think KUDO's got a better opportunity than that. And from that, you may then get people going, "Oh, that looks like fun. I want to do that," and that will bring them into the karate as well. So I think it's definitely got a place to go, but not just from growing from within. I think if people see more of it, I think it will bring people into.
No, you know, that's really helpful. Because I mean, some of the feedback, well, it's quite often, to be honest, that people say, "Oh, it's really rough and it's like this," and I say, "Well, like, I mean, I could spend hours doing this and then scoring a point, but man, it's like." And one thing that I noticed as well, the way you close distance, that, you know, Headbutt would be definitely one of your favorites as well. I can see, because you're bringing that head in like nearly every single time you do it, and I think that is not necessarily common sense until you do get headbutted quite frequently, right? And or clash heads or whatever. You know, you've got to brace for that, and you know the scrappiness of it. Unless you can get people to experience it, they don't tend to get that. You know, they want to see the flashier stuff. So it's maybe it's back to that kind of Bruce Lee area that, you know, it's that one.
It's a different kind of aesthetic, though, I think, as well. You know, so on the arts that tend to look spectacular in competition, where you get all the really fancy kicking. I mean, you get that in KUDO too. You know, but you know, they tend to have quite a strict rule set to shape the kind of fight that they think people want to see. You know, which again, then you become reliant on the rules. You know, so if those rules change, then the entire game changes. Well, I think KUDO's a much more honest and open rule set. But yeah, that headbutting, knee and elbowing. Two of my green belts once went on a KUDO course.
Yeah.
So they'd shown an interest in it, so they went on, and the guy who was running the course had said to them, "Okay, this is the helmet. This is how it works. Do you want any volunteers to have a bit of a fight?" So these two were dead key. Yeah, we'll do it. He says, right. He says, "Okay, you can headbutt, knee and elbow." Well, I think they thought this helmet would make them invincible. The first time, bang! One missed it. Oh, on that more than I thought it was. So they were saying, it was. So then, of course, instantly they both started up on it, but they loved it.
Yeah.
But not for everybody, but no, they really enjoyed it. I'm sure it'll catch on. It's like any of these things. I think they're a slow burn until they reach that critical mass.
I'm persevering, I'm sticking with it, so it's I'm open and like yourself, you come in on the channel, we'll get more views. It's one of those things that's going to help massively. So thank you for that. And in return as well, one of the, when you're looking at that martial map, and excuse me if I'm generalizing this a little bit, but the self-protection element, for instance, I see an overlap in nearly all the arts into that to a certain extent. Like for instance, in the last grade, in one of my students, he's just fitter than me, blah blah blah. So I took it into an element where I could take away all of those strategies that he'd have, and I see that very much as a self-protection way of working things. I'm protecting myself. I'm taking away his strengths. And basically, I just grabbed his gi and pulled it over his head and constantly headbutted it. And as a martial artist, that's like you'll know what I'm talking about. and it was kind of, he laughed about it afterwards. But it's kind of having that situational awareness, isn't it, that you're talking about? And it's a completely specialist area. And obviously, you've come from that. How much has that impacted on the way that you teach?
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, I'll do it dead briefly. It was over 10 years ago. I did a podcast, which is probably the most popular thing I've done. Yeah. And it basically, I just a Venn diagram with 3 overlapping circles: self-protection, fighting, and martial arts. So self-protection is keeping yourself safe from criminals. Fighting is a consensual fight where you agree to fight someone in a given way and you have symmetrical objectives. You agree what a win is. And then you've got martial arts, which are the health benefits, the cultural interest, self-challenging, all that kind of stuff. And what I was clear to do on that is show where they cross over and where they don't. And it's non-judgmental, because everything has value when judged against its own criteria, you see. Yeah. So I think for the self-protection side of things, there obviously is a physical element to that. So there's a crossover between self-protection and fighting skills. There are some fighting skills that have no relevance to self-protection. Provoking trained responses, closing gaps, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have relevance. But the biggest part of self-protection has got nothing to do with martial arts or anything like that. It's a personal security issues, So, and I think most people, if they go to martial arts for self-defense, they're at the wrong place. Right. If they want to learn martial arts as well, and they want that martial arts to have relevance to self-protection as part of it, great. Yeah. Well, I said the one I always remember is, it was a little few years ago now. I obviously I'm a professional martial arts instructor, but I don't charge for self-defense courses. Never have done, because I always regard that as just being a public good. If they insist on paying me, it always goes to charity, right? We agree to charity. Cool. So I was asked to do one for the Women's Institute. So for those who don't, so the average age of the women there, they're all 70 plus. So I'm not going to be saying, come on, ladies, let's get the head guards on, the gloves on. I'll show you how to, So the entire course was just about, crime stats in our area, personal security things, simple things that could take, for the day. But when I teach in the karate dojo, that's different, because they're there because they like martial arts, so they want to learn all of it. They want to learn what's relevant to self-defense. They want to learn some fighting skills for each other. And most of them, having picked an art like karate, are interested in that cultural side of it, being part of a tradition, the enjoyment of learning a skill. So my trick is just to make sure as we move around that map, I always clearly label it. So if we've got guards up moving around, working on ways to close the gap, we go, this is fighting skills. Right. If we're working on breaking away from someone and running for help and escaping, this is a self-defense skill. Yeah. And if we're doing something old and archaic just for the fun of it, I'll go, this is a really, really old thing. We're just doing it because it's historically interesting. Why not? yeah. Why not? So long as you label it what it is, I don't have any issue with that at all. Yeah. And I think it's, I've been guilty of this. In my 20s and 30s, it was all very pragmatic self-defense focused. That's all I cared about. Yeah. despite the fact that all of my instructors kept reminding me, you know, see the big picture, Ian, see the big picture, but I just didn't. And then it was having gone through that, I realised I'm missing out on a lot here. I want to get back to fighting someone just for the fun of fighting somebody, and I should be able to enjoy historical and cultural things for their own. You know, it has to be enjoyable too. So nowadays I use this thing where I say it's got to be life preserving and life enhancing for me. So life preserving has two elements. It's got to work for self-defense, and it's got to keep you fit and healthy. So it preserves life. And then life enhancing, it's got to be fun and interesting. Yeah. You know what I mean? So any martial art for me that didn't fulfill those criteria wouldn't be a martial art for me. I know not everybody's interested in every element, but I am. So karate works for me because it ticks the boxes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've been a professional 20 years, isn't it?
It'll be, I'm trying to think what year it was. So coming up to that, I think it was 2003, I quit my job. So 17 years. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're doing well to be going about that.
And then a pandemic hits.
Don't start. I went self-employed. Oh my God! And anyway, I'm living. I'm still happy because I'm chasing my dreams. So
same here. You know,
but you very much, and I think that's where people have to understand that you know, they may be trying to get an understanding of these things, but you've already thought about them. You know, the structures are there for them to do it. I mean,
that's the thing for me. I always say, like, you kind of tech support for the martial arts, right? So the seminars, the idea is, if you're interested in this stuff, I can save you a bit of time. You know, so here's something that you might find useful that, you know, that I've thought about that you may be able to just pick up and run with and use. So whether it's a drill or an idea or a training method, so here it is, it's yours, run with it, make it your own. But one thing I'm always keen on, going back to this evolution thing, is I always say, if Ian Rue ever exists, I've failed. You know, I failed. You know, 'cause the whole point is, you know, I want, and it's the same for we have it built into our syllabus that once hit the brown belt, they have to start innovating and making things their own as well, you see. So you know, I never want to be the final word on something, you know what I mean, but I hope that some of what I've done will be useful to people to help them do what they want to do, you know.
So Ian the Past Master is not a good title then?
No, well, we want to hope it, you know, but you know, at some point I want people looking back what I did and
of course,
it's fine for its time, but we all do that now, or we've seen that now, or you know, that's when you know you've been useful, right?
Yeah, well, it's like specific, isn't it? You know, like we're saying, the protection thing. When I was in my 20s, I was just all about teaching what it's going to be like to be able to fight in a pub, you know, because I'd been sucker punched in the toilet. Because then I learned that when you've got a problem with someone and you spot it, when you go to the toilet, they're going to come and hit you. So I started coming up with techniques to deal with the guy when the door is opening. Hide behind the door, for instance, and then you realized actually I could stop going to these places. You know, and then obviously you grow up. But I really appreciate your time, Ian. It's an absolute pleasure. Obviously we're going to point everybody at the direction, and supporting you through COVID is very important, and we're going to make sure that everything is still there on the other side, as they say.
We're getting there.
Thanks very much.
Nice to speak to you, Mark. Appreciate it.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye bye.